welcome to this episode of Max Q. This is a startup-focused podcast. We interview founders, investors, people who have run successful businesses for many, many years, and it's all in the effort to support our community of startups. So we're all learning, we're all growing, we're all creating meaningful connections. And so with that, I have the privilege of introducing Tyrone today. I'm so excited to have him here on the show. So he has many different companies and he has quite the background in business, but I'm really excited for him to talk about his heart for startups, his goals, his mission, the thing that he's building right now. And it's truly a privilege to have you here. So with that, please introduce yourself.
Hi, Molly. Nice to meet you. Nice to be here again. And my name is Tyrone Moodley. I'm born in Zimbabwe. My mother's Zambian. My father's South African. And I went to school in Texas. I studied triple majored in information systems, accounting, and cybersecurity. I've worked in Austin, Raleigh, North Carolina, Toronto, and now Kitchener-Waterloo. I've worked for different companies, e-commerce, e-licensing, e-procurement, banking, insurance. Worked on Wall Street, sorry, not Wall Street, Bay Street, which is the Wall Street of Canada. And I've built hedging software. So I've also worked building NFT marketplaces and crypto projects. So one of my passions is really connecting traditional finance with decentralized finance. And the reason that we came up with Ndeipi was because of my family. My family in Zambia are basically big into ranching. So my grandfather was born in Saskatchewan, Regina, Saskatchewan, and he moved with the British to northern Rhodesia at the time, and he was purchasing cattle from the Ila people, and the Ilas have been raising cattle for hundreds of years. The Nilotic people, they migrated from I think it was East Africa all the way to Central Africa, which is Zambia now, and they've been raising cattle, and that's part of the culture. So when he got there, he was basically purchasing cattle from the Ilas to send to feed the British troops during World War One, and he decided to stay, and he married my grandmother and had my mother, and basically it was a very interesting story because he ended up when he married my grandmother, he had to pay what's called a lobola, which is a dowry. So he paid a dowry of 52 cows to my uncle Teddy, which is my grandmother's brother, and this was in 1960. And over the years, Uncle Teddy grew those 52 cows to 5,000 cows. And when he passed away last year, he passed away at the age of 93. And he had over 5,000 head of cattle. Now, if he was sitting in Texas, he'd be a very wealthy man. He'd be a multimillionaire. Right. But because of the financial systems in the rural areas, especially specifically in the village, there aren't any banking institutions that cater to people like Uncle Teddy. So what ends up happening is you have these loan sharks that charge 50% interest to the ranchers. Now, if you try to run a business and somebody's offering you 50% interest, you're not going to take it unless you're super desperate. Right. So what ends up happening is they get stuck in this cycle of poverty. So even though because their culture is not to spend all their cattle, so they're not going to sell all their cattle because they're trying to grow their wealth. So what happens is when I looked at the situation, I realized that there's a lot of people in that region and in Africa that are asset rich but cash poor. And a few years ago, I went to a conference in Toronto where I witnessed a lady that was dressed in a catsuit giving a speech. She was giving a keynote speech, and she was.
I'm smiling because I've heard this. I'm smiling because I've heard this story and I love it, and I'm excited for you to tell it again.
So I'm sitting in the audience and I'm looking up, and this lady is going on and on about this company of hers, and it's called Dapper Labs. They're based in Vancouver, and I believe they're worth a few $1 billion. They were a unicorn at that time, and I'm like, how are we all taking her seriously? And going on about how she's using Cypress testing tools to test front end stuff because it's all in Vue.js, and I'm just perplexed, and I'm like, this is odd. This is really odd. And then I go onto the website and I see these NFTs, these cats, and each cat has its own DNA, and they mate the cats, and the cats have kittens, and each kitten has the DNA of the parent cat. And the most expensive cat NFT was 400 ethers, which is like, $1.2 million. So
It's crazy to me.
I'm looking at this and I'm like, wow, these silly cats have no intrinsic value, but they're worth so much because it's a collectible. And then, Dapper Labs eventually goes on and they sign deals with the NBA and the NFL. And they're making, cards on, NFT cards for the athletes. But it always hit me. And then when I looked at my uncle, I was like, wow, he has 5,000 cows and he's struggling to get a loan, but his cat is selling for 1.2 million.
He needs the cow suit. He needs to dress up in the cow
Well,
suit.
he needs a cow suit, yeah. So I I then thought to myself, okay, how do we link the two worlds? How do we tokenize the cows and provide
Right.
liquidity for the farmers for these poor villages, and because they're actually quite wealthy, but the problem
Right.
is that it's creating that bridge between the traditional finance with decentralized finance. So I said, you know what? Why don't we just tokenize? We create these NFTs and we'll put it, instead of crypto kitties, we'll have like crypto cows. And I even went and I registered the domain crypto cows, right?
Good. You
Um,
should.
but then we hit a snag. We hit a problem because it was now okay. We've tokenized these cattle, but now there's no real market for them. And most people, and at the same time the NFT market kind of like tanked.
Hmm.
Like NFTs aren't fashionable anymore, right? um but the concept was still there because it was tokenizing the cattle. Then I realized, I was like, wow, this is actually a bigger problem than just the people in the village, because if you look at other systems and you look at remittances and you look at gold and you look at um, other precious minerals like copper and platinum and lithium, and even oil and gas, it all has the same problem. It's like, how do you link the two worlds? And then I started understanding about RWA's real world assets, and I realized that, oh, if we focus not just on the cattle, but we look at it as a holistic issue, and we were able to build this app, the super app that was able to tokenize not just the cattle, but tokenize the gold, and tokenize all the different minerals. Not only could we fund the the cattle, we could fund other projects too, and we could help all these people get out of poverty. And then growing up, because I lived in the US and I lived in Texas for over a decade, there were other problems in Texas too that kind of followed the same sort of um, issues like that the people had in the village, where people didn't have access to liquidity. And the money was maybe it was circulated within certain communities, but not in others, right?
Right.
And you know, we realized that within certain communities, like the Muslim and the Jewish communities, money circulated 16 times, but within Christian communities, it only circulated once or twice. And that's when my partner Ken in LA, we've been working together for over a decade on multiple startups. He said, well, why don't we just build something for the churches? Because that's a that's a community that needs it. So we
Hmm.
we started speaking to the ministers, and they said, yeah, build us this app. Basically, we use Cash App, we use Venmo, we use all these different systems, and we'll adopt it. And then with that, there we could increase the circular economy, and our members could buy from each other, and they could keep the money circulating, and maybe we could buy some of the gold in Africa, and we could store it here. And, we could support each other. And
Right.
if you look at different industries like remittances, for example. There's so much money that gets lost going across. There's over $90 billion that gets sent back to Africa, but that money is sort of like dead money because it goes in and it disappears. Like you don't see. I mean, people use it, but it doesn't circulate. So if you look at all the infrastructure projects in Africa, Africa needs about $90 billion a year to build dams and roads and buildings, but we get 90 billion coming in from the diaspora every year. So if we could
Mhm.
figure out a way to capture that, and one country did it well, that was Ethiopia. Ethiopia created these diaspora bonds, and they were able to build that massive dam. It was one of the largest dams in the world. And Ethiopia is now mining Bitcoin, and they've got an excess
Right.
of power. Yeah. So they did it correctly, but the problem is that you have to have the investment vehicle to be able to do that.
Hmm.
So and again, as I mentioned, from one small little, problem that we were trying to solve, it kind
Hmm.
of snowballed into this huge opportunity. And soon, mines, gold listed gold mining companies on the Canadian, American, and German exchanges were contacting us to help them tokenize their gold resources in Peru and in Africa. And that's when we were like, okay, we're onto something.
Right.
And now we're talking to different governments where we say, look, we'll come in and we'll create this. We'll let you. We'll implement our blockchain system, and we'll tokenize your resources. And you can also use our super app, and we can track things like tenders. We can track things like licensing, digital identities.
Yes, that's a big
Basically,
one.
we'll put everything on the blockchain, and now we can actually get rid of corruption, right? Because now, if you get rid of corruption, you can actually attract more funding
Right.
to
Well, and use
fund
the money
infrastructure
well.
projects. Exactly, and you can use the money the right way.
Hmm.
But then it's just, it's kind of following the whole kingdom economics principles, right?
Right.
So so that's now what we kind of focused on is saying, okay, how can we, we don't want to give loans because, well, loans with high interest rates because that's usury, right? So
Hmm.
let's just follow the principles, right? They right there, and the blockchain is there. And I believe that God has given us blockchain as it's a gift from God, because if you look and see what the blockchain can do for humanity, it's massive. It's even better.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't know if it's better than AI, but at least we don't have to worry about the blockchain killing us.
I know for all the AI, yeah, all the AI, like, aficionados in the audience, but we'll edit that part out.
Yeah, it's like, like we can do without AI, but I think with blockchain it's an important technology that can solve humanity's problems, because the immutability is what's important. The fact that it's
Mhm.
transparent and people can see every transaction and it's out there, it's
Mhm.
the truth, right? You can't steal and you can't change stuff. And but it operates just like money, and that's the beauty
Mhm.
about it.
I love that. Thank you for sharing your story. I think it was really well done, really and succinct too, for I know there's a lot of depth and a lot of nuance to it. So I appreciate that. While we still have your time, I would love to ask you a couple other questions. So for the founders in the audience, um, you know, what are some things that you think they should think about as they start their journey?
Well, this is like my 15th startup. I've been building startups.
That's why I ask, because I know you have a history of doing it. So I was hoping you could impart some wisdom.
I think, for me, and one of my partners told me, he says, you don't you don't beat a dead horse. He says when something's not working, you kind of move on. So I think it's important to pivot, because if you get stuck, beating that dead horse, and it happens even in corporations. They have the term the dead horse theory, where companies will, they'll look at the dead horse and they'll say, well, if we just bought a new saddle, You know, we could
Wasn't it
fix
the
the
sunk
world.
cost fallacy, right? Where you've already
Yeah,
invested so much,
that's basically
right? You have to keep
exactly.
going.
And it's important to not get tied to what you've put in, and um, because you end up just going around in circles, and you could spend 4 years on a project, and it might not be the right time for that,
Yeah.
right? You might, like, if you look at Steve Jobs when he came out with the concept of the tablet, right?
Mhm.
I think it was in the 80s, and he said, right now this is not the right time for this technology. When the technology improves, we'll come back and build this. And it was like, what, 8 years later, they
Mhm.
built the iPhone, and eventually the iPad. And so yeah, I fail fast, fail often. That book, The Lean Startup, if everybody has read The Lean Startup, that's like the best book I read in my life, because it taught me fail fast, fail often, right?
Yes.
Because the more times you're failing, the closer you're going to get to your win.
Well, you actually beat me to it. I was going to ask you what you're reading right now, but I think your favorite book of all time might be a better question. So that sounds like it's The Lean Startup.
Well, you know, I'm not really an Apple guy. I love Microsoft. But I would say I really did enjoy Steve Jobs' book. I loved it because it kind of teaches you about building stuff, building products that your customers didn't even know they needed, right? And focusing
Yes.
on that UI UX. And once you
Hmm.
do that, you sort of you're building a movement, because if you look at people that love Apple products, it's almost like they're
Right.
disciples for Apple, right? They
Cult.
they they
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a cult. It's like they become fanboys, Apple fanboys, and everything's Apple. The laptop is Apple, the phone is Apple, right?
All your
I think the
chargers, all your
charger,
AirPods, everything you have to go with it.
everything, and it's like it's actually quite interesting to observe if you've been in tech for a while, because they're the most loyal customers ever.
Hmm.
I don't think
Really,
most
they
Apple
are.
people will never switch. They'll never switch. Even in my family, everyone else in my family are all into iPhones, and I'm the only one that's into Android.
I have an Android. Here's the proof. I don't have an iPhone either.
So, we're contrarians, right?
Yeah, yes.
So, so
That's
yeah,
funny. Well,
fail fast, fail often. I think that if
I
you
love
live
that.
by that, you won't go wrong.
That's fantastic. Well, and as we close, I want to give you space to kind of just promote your startup. I don't know if you want to like, there's a call to action. If you'd love people to come follow you, how can they connect with you after this?
Yeah, so if you go to ndeipi.com, first of all, Ndeipi it means what's up in Shona, in the local language in Zimbabwe, and that's Ndeipi.com, Ndeipi. And if you just follow us on Instagram, on X, on Facebook, and LinkedIn, it's actually ndeipicoin.com. You can follow the handle Ndeipicoin. Like, subscribe. There's a few videos on YouTube that we're pushing out. I've written 3 books, and what I'm doing now, because people have said that they don't like to read, I'm converting the books into videos on YouTube. So
Oh, that's
I've
great.
already I've created there's one called The One, right? And The One is basically we are all the one. So it's following the concept of Satoshi. I'm not sure if you know what
Yes.
Satoshi is, right?
Well, I
So
think it
so
was what the Matrix was based off of, wasn't it? And then Neo is the
kind
one. I don't
of.
know, maybe like that same like
Yeah, I mean,
principle.
I might have borrowed some ideas from The Matrix as the one, but
Okay, okay. I
but
mean,
it,
it's a great movie, so
yeah, it was my favorite. So, but if you think of Satoshi, most Bitcoiners will say we are Satoshi. So Ndeipi is building the first hedged Bitcoin,
Mhm.
which is our Afro gold dollar, which is a stable coin. And the idea is that with Bitcoin, it's extremely volatile. So you don't really want to be all in on Bitcoin, but you want to have enough exposure so you can capture the gains. So what we
Mhm.
do is we take approach where we buy 70% of the liquidity is in Bitcoin, and then 30% is in gold. And when Bitcoin goes up, we sell Bitcoin, some of it, and we buy more gold, and we just
Mm-hmm.
keep on stacking. And then if Bitcoin starts going down, we start liquidating gold and buying Bitcoin. So as Bitcoin keeps on going down, and once it stopped, like right now, Bitcoin hit 107. What is it? I think it was
Right.
107 a few months ago. So at that point, we were going to be selling, and
Mm-hmm.
then as it got down to 78, 80, and it's been hovering around 80 for a while, we start
Mm-hmm.
liquidating gold and purchasing more Bitcoin. And as we hope that it's going to continue going up, but we try to keep our ratios at 70-30 so that, let's say if it was at 40-60, we'd have just liquidated 10% to put
Mm-hmm.
more funds into Bitcoin. And that way, you don't have to be sitting there biting your nails, wondering if the world's going to
Right.
end. We take care
People
of
may
all
do
that.
that anyway, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could just hold your funds in our stablecoin, and you don't have to worry. You capture the gains, right?
no, I love that. Thank you. Thank you. So everybody gets a book and some amazing financial advice from.
Well, the book there's two books right now on our website, and those books, one is $9.99, and so I lived through the hyperinflation in Zimbabwe during 2004 to 2008. So
Mhm.
I write about what that was like living through that, and how the government kept on printing money, and there was just inflation, and eventually our currency collapsed,
Right.
and then I talk about how I moved to the US, and um, this whole DeFi revolution that's going on right now. And I
Right.
just so it's called from inflation to blockchain, right?
Love
And
that.
then the
Well, I'll
the
link all
second
these too in the chat for
Thank you.
everybody. So in the video, I'll make sure that all of this is in there. Everyone can grab links or go to the books and things like that too.
And then the second book is Ndeipi, Africa's Digital Renaissance, and that just talks about the potential of blockchain in a place like Africa, because in Africa there's an opportunity to leapfrog a lot of the systems that are existing. So they
Hmm.
leapfrog payments with M-Pesa. If you follow M-Pesa in Kenya, um, they leapfrogged the telephone. They went straight to cell phone, straight to e-banking. So I believe with blockchain, Africa could leapfrog a lot of different systems like the SaaS model, while we could
Yeah.
go straight to decentralized apps. Um, and then the actual book that I'm converting to video, that's going to be free, because I believe the message is very important for people. The concept of the one, how we are all part of this network, this global network, and how we
Hmm.
can basically in a way eradicate poverty. Right?
Love that. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Molly. It was a pleasure.